start by saying thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. We've got a 30-minute session just going to talk about the career clusters, the resource pack that we've created, and give you a couple of ideas for how you can use that at school. So bear with me while I just share my screen. Okay, there you go. So you should be able to see that hopefully now. So I'd love to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands where I'm coming to you from. So I'm in Cairns. That's the home of the Giveaway, Wallaburri and Didji people. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. And also going to let you know that today's session is going to be recorded. And as I said before, it's going to be going up on YouTube later. And I'll be popping it on LinkedIn and sending it out by email. So if you want to share it with any colleagues or you want to send it to anyone else, you'll be able to do that as well after the session. So we're going to talk about a few things today. I'm going to give you a really quick rundown of the actual clusters, how they work, how we put them all together, and what each of them are. We're going to be looking at how the resource pack works and then going through some ways that you can use them in your schools or your other educational institutions, and also helping you unpack whether or not you want to use the quiz and that kind of thing as well. And there will be some time. I'll be hanging around at the end for some questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I can't promise I'm going to read them while I'm speaking, but we'll get to them at the end. So there are 6 career clusters, and what they are is a tool that you can use to start conversations. It's a concept or an idea. It's not a physical thing, and they're not set in stone. And I sincerely hope that they do continue to develop and grow and change over time. As more people start using them, we get more feedback, contribute to the whole ecosystem around them. So while we've said that this is what they are for now, they are a living, breathing thing that we are all going to be able to use to talk with young people. They're definitely not a psychometric assessment. It's not a super formal process that's set in concrete. And it's much more about having positive conversations and giving us a way of speaking about careers than it is about defining people or telling them that they belong in a particular cluster. It's not supposed to be about that at all. We've arrived at 6 clusters. That tends to work really well for most people to be able to get their heads around, particularly young people, and it covers most of the kind of main ways of working that we tend to see. How we got to those 6 is that we started looking at the ways that we currently talk about jobs and how we classify them and how we break them down to help us understand them. So we looked at how the government breaks jobs down into industries so that they can regulate and they can tax different industries. And we looked at how university use study areas to help students work out what they're going to study. But those things, they don't always encompass all of the different things that really need to be included within when we're talking about jobs. And it wasn't quite enough. So we started thinking about how else we could do it. There was some great research that was done by the Foundation for Young Australians in about 2016, 2017 that looked at different skills, so technical and transferable skills. And they looked at a huge number of job advertisements, used machine learning, and they came up with these 7 clusters, which are pretty similar to ours because we did use that as a starting point. But that was very much focused on the actual skill sets, and they did tend to align in the majority with existing industries. We also looked at a lot of the OECD data, so that they did some great work into thinking about how young people talk about careers and the kinds of things they say they're interested in doing and they think that they're going to do. And we took a lot of that thinking around how they're talking about careers into the clusters. So we've made them engaging and easy to understand. We've tried to use language that is unbiased, or it doesn't sway them to one particular gender, for example, or another. And it's very inclusive. So everything that we've used in those terms is separate to how we used to talk about work, and it gives young people a fresh sort of way of thinking about things. And the last thing that we did that played a major role in the career clusters was we looked at what My Future had done when they created their profiling tool. Now, they were looking at unpacking another existing tool and seeing if they could adjust it to Australia. And their research came up with this idea that we need to look holistically at ways of working rather than just looking at skill sets or industries or outcomes or anything like that. We need to kind of take all of that into consideration when we're talking about ways of working if we're going to help people work out where they sit. So this is what we've come up with, is each cluster really contains people who are brought together because they share different tasks, different skill sets, technical and transferable. They work towards different outcomes. They have different values, and also they work in the same sort of work environments, workplace settings. So an example of how this works in practice is within one of the clusters. So we have informers. Their skill set for an informer is usually around this deep knowledge about a topic, whether that's anything from the law or accounting through to diving, if they're a diving instructor. And they've also got great communication skills, because to be an informer and help other people, you've kind of got to have that ability to talk and to communicate and share your knowledge with someone else. When we talk about tasks, they're usually helping other people. So an informer isn't necessarily creating the finished product themselves, but they will be supporting someone else who is creating that finished product. So if we're talking about an accountant, for example, they might be working with a business owner to help them manage their business, but they're not actually managing the business themselves. Their shared outcomes for informers are usually around supporting other people. So supporting those other people to achieve their goal. And if that's occurred, then the informers finish their job. And when we talk about work environments for informers, they're usually really professional settings. They've usually got to have access to a lot of data and research and a lot of information. And they're also able to collaborate with others. So when we take all of those things and look at them holistically, we get this group of people who work in that kind of similar way. So this is what we think is going to be the final version of the career cluster wheel. It's very new, it's not out yet, but I thought I'd just show it to you so you can get a bit of an idea of how we've actually started to unpack the clusters, break them down further, and in time to come, we're going to be working on more resources that help you do that with young people and students as well. It's got a lot of color in it, but it is colorblind friendly, it is inclusive, and we're hoping that it's really accessible for a huge range of students to be able to use this wheel and really unpack things from there. I'm just going to go over each of the 6 clusters in detail. So we start with the guardians. The guardians are people who are really interested in health and well-being. That doesn't necessarily mean that they all sit within doctors, nurses, medical fields. We're also talking about fitness trainers, so people who are very concerned about helping people be their best. Beauty therapists, people who are helping you look after your physical appearance, and also people who work within the safety field. So that might be firefighters who are literally physically protecting you. But it's also people who are doing like OH&S roles, or safety inspectors, food safety inspectors, that kind of thing as well. Makers are the people who make things happen. So these are generally physical people who are physically operating, maintaining equipment. They're building things, they're constructing, producing, or repairing. So it includes a lot of trades, but we're also talking about people like chefs, pilots fit into this group because they're operating technical equipment. Anyone who's doing that kind of work fits within makers. Informers are all about knowledge. So they've usually got very deep knowledge about an area, and then they use that to help other people. And yes, this includes things like lawyers, accountants, teachers, but we're also talking about diving instructors, horse whisperers, anyone who's got a vast amount of knowledge about that area and uses it to help other people fits within the informers. Linkers are people who really act like that bridge. They connect the public, or so everyone else, with an organization or with a business or with whatever it is that they're connecting them with. So this includes salespeople, which is where we find people tend to go first when they think about linkers, but it's also talking about social workers who might be connecting young people in the community with other support services that they need. Or it might be somebody who works, say, in a school and is helping you work out where you want to sit or where you want to enroll your children. So it does encompass quite a large number of people. Anyone who's connecting the public with the organization is going to fit within the linkers. The innovators are our designers, our engineers. These are the people who are coming up with new ideas for how we can do things. And we have put within the innovators both people who are working with physical design, so graphic designers, artists, architects, but also the technology developers and designers and engineers. So software developers, app developers, they're all in this category together. we're finding one of the things that we're noticing is that technology is impacting so much on all kinds of innovation roles now, all roles really everywhere. And it's very difficult to separate those two things out. So we put them together. And the last cluster are the coordinators. So these are the people who are planning and managing, and they're doing all of that kind of work to make everything else happen. So it includes people from the receptionists and the administration staff all the way through to CEOs, head of operations, includes people like wedding planners and business managers. A huge range of people fit in this category. And what we end up with is these clusters. And we've deliberately chosen to work with clusters, not boxes, because I find that some of the other tools, they tend to put you into a specific box. They say, this is your category, that's where you belong. But life isn't like that, and work isn't like that. People tend to develop, they tend to move, they tend to shift. So instead, we've put them in these flexible clusters. We've also noticed that as we're speaking with people who are further along in their career, that they tend to sit across multiple clusters. Lots of career advisors that I talk to tend to sit across, 2 or 3 at least. In the way that they work, and you can't just stick them in one box and say your job belongs in that box, because it's just not possible to do that. So when we use clusters like this, it allows people to move and change and be a bit more dynamic, and it reflects that what we know about the world of work and our careers in terms of that dynamism. So we need every cluster within every industry and every workplace, and I think this is where the clusters can really help us to start to understand a bit more about the depth of roles that exist within every workplace. One of the things that really frustrates me is that when we're talking with young people, they'll often see like the shiny surface job that's the most popular for that particular industry or that particular workplace. And they'll really struggle to see who else might also work alongside those people. So really good example is if you talk to a young person about working at a fire station, they're going to say firefighter straight up. But there are so many other people who work supporting the firefighters to do what they do, and that often gets missed. So as an example, I've got a school environment here, and you can see that within each cluster, you've got different people who are working in that school environment. And without all of those different people, that school wouldn't be able to operate. You're going to need OH&S officers to make sure that the school remains safe and that everyone can access what they need to within the school grounds. You're going to need the accounts officers to manage the accounts and make sure that all the payments have been made for excursions and new senior shirts and whatever else it is you've got to pay for. And it does take all of those clusters, all of those people to keep that school operating. So that when we're talking about a school as a workplace that somebody might want to work in, we're not just seeing the teacher that stands at the front and that everyone thinks of first, we're seeing all those other roles as well. And I'm finding that the career clusters are really powerful because one of the things they do when I talk with young people is they give young people a place to start. So in conversations, that's often the absolute hardest bit, is finding that place to start their exploration from. And so what we've done is we've said to people that they can combine their cluster when they've had to think about which cluster they sit in, or they've done the quiz, for example, with the stuff that they're interested in. And together, then we can end up at some career ideas and a place to start exploring. So as an example, if you've got a young person who has found out that they're an informer, or they feel like they fit within the informer cluster, but they're also really into water sports and being physically active, then they might want to combine those two things together and say, look at becoming a dive instructor, for example. Or if you've got a student who is really keen on medicine, desperately wants to be a doctor, but their quiz results say that they're an innovator and maybe not so much a guardian, then they might want to look at something like biomedical engineering, and they can combine that interest in medicine with their strengths within their cluster. And it doesn't mean they have to then pick that, but it just gives them somewhere to start that exploration process. It gives them something tangible to hold on to, which is what I'm finding is working so well with young people. So when it comes to you engaging with the clusters, we know that as a concept, that's great, but then, how to actually use them within a school environment? So we've created a suite of resources. These are really designed with young people, with educators, and they're designed to help young people engage and explore and think and start conversations. These resources are really similar to the Ponder program. So if you've already got the Ponder program, everything's going to look pretty similar and you're going to be able to use them the same way. I'm just going to cover each of them now and how they all work. So the first thing is that we tend to use this sort of 3-phase model with what we do. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who uses this model, but it works well for us. It's also flexible and adjustable. So if you don't have time to cover all 3 phases, or if you just want to say head to the Discover section and skip the discussions, you can do that as well. Within that Discover phase, we're talking about the presentation slides and also the videos. What we find is that a lot of the concepts that we talk about, particularly within the Ponder program, where we're developing career management competency, the young person might be aware of the fact that it exists, or they might have some sort of subconscious awareness or idea about that concept, but they haven't really unpacked it or kind of thought about it as a discrete thing. So the Discover modules are usually quite powerful in getting them to have that little, oh, okay, aha moment, and then they can think then a bit more about what it means. Within the discussion, I find that's really where the good stuff happens. That's with the conversations. And to do that, we've created, so within the slides, there are discussion prompts, and any teacher can deliver those. We give them suggestions for what to look out for ideas for answers. And we also cover, some things to think about if they've got, say, a particular type of learning cohort. We've also got the workbooks. So that helps them have those discussions and then unpack things a little bit further. And within that do phase, we're talking about the quiz here, and really from there, them finding out what their cluster is or learning a little bit more about what clusters they might be aligned to, and then going on and putting that into practice and having that exploration phase and doing some active career exploration. So when you sign up for the career clusters, it's a really quick process, and I'll share the link at the end. We have to add you into the system and activate you when we send you a code. That way, if you run your students through the quiz, they're all connected to you and to your account so that you can see how they've gone and no one else can. You can access everything through the dashboard. It's the same dashboard that Ponder members are already using. So the career cluster resources are there, and you'll be able to download everything from there. Right now, it's got a lot of resources, but we're also adding more resources. And as we add more, they'll continue to go into that dashboard. And you can also see your students from the dashboard as well and see their results. The key resource as part of the pack that we've created is this Career Cluster Resource Pack PDF. It's very similar to the one that we have created for Ponder, and we spent a lot of time with that resource testing it in schools, testing it not only with careers advisors, but with subject area teachers. So this PDF is it's designed to be so easy to use that you could hand this to a science teacher or an English teacher, ask them to deliver a particular unit, and they should have all of the instructions, information, and resources that they need within that one PDF to be able to do that. They don't need to log into our website. They don't need to come back to you for anything else. It's all just contained within this PDF. You can get the slides from here. You can get the student workbook from this PDF. There's some information about the quiz. You'll also find that information on your dashboard, but it's in this PDF as well. And it also talks about how you can adjust things. So if you do need to adjust things down the track or for your particular students, you can do that as well. This is really quickly an example of some of the PowerPoint presentations. For the career clusters, they all have about 5 slides. The first slide is an introduction to the topic with some notes. Second has a video on it. And then the 3rd, 4th, and 5th slide just prompt the student to either have a discussion or do a bit of thinking. And the last one will talk about the activity as well. If you're using the 3 set of slides that you'll be able to access after when you've registered, on the last set of slides, the last slide actually has a link or prompt to go to the quiz. So all of that's in there for you. And if you are delivering the presentations, you'll be instructed. There's all sorts of instructions throughout it so that you just have to follow those to be able to help your students use the quiz. And we've also created the student workbook. So this is really similar to Ponder as well. It follows that 3-unit delivery module. So unit 1, unit 2, and unit 3. But you can actually just use this workbook completely independently. If you wanted, you could just send it out to students and they'd still get something out of it because we've included a page or 2 that talk about the topic. And then the activity as well. So, and you don't have to use the workbook with the quiz. You could just use it and let your students, it might be particularly good if you've got students who aren't in class for any reason, or if you've got distance learners. It's suitable for all ages. I find that generally The difference will be if you're giving it to a year 7 or an 8 cohort or a year 11 and 12 cohort, they're just going to come up with different answers, but they're still going to be kind of going through the same sort of thinking processes, but it's just that the older students will be a bit more in depth in their responses. If you haven't already seen it, you can get access to the career cluster report as well through the dashboard. This is really good for giving to your school leadership. So if you are looking for something that you want to support why you want to embed the career clusters within your school or your educational place, then you can use this report. And it contains a lot of information about how we develop the clusters and also how they work. And we've developed a quiz. It's not a psychometric test. It's very much there to start conversations. You can use it in class, or you could use it before or during a counselling session. So if you've got a one-on-one coming up with a young person and you want them to have done the career cluster quiz first, that works. It also works in class. We've tested it with groups of up to about 60, 70 students, year 9 students, and they did really well with it. They were all able to do it on their phones or on their laptops, and it worked really well. And we've also used it at expos, so at a little school career expos, where the students were able to get their quiz results on their phones and then walk around and show them to different exhibitors as well, so they could have more in-depth conversations about their results. So lots of different ways you can use the quiz. It doesn't just have to be done in one-on-ones. If they're going to take the quiz, it's 30 questions. It takes students about 5 minutes to do. They can all do it by themselves. We tested it with lots of different students. They do not need help to do this. It's easy, and there's just a choice of 2 statements each time. What we find is that sometimes they find it hard because we're not all sitting just in one discrete cluster. We usually spread across a few. So sometimes they want to answer yes to both of the statements, or sometimes they don't like either of the statements. So as long as they know that that's going to happen and they don't think that they've broken the system or there's something wrong with them when that happens, then it's totally fine and they can do it all themselves. And when they finish, they get a result like this. So it's non-specific deliberately. We don't tell them exactly where they sit, although this person's probably going to be sitting pretty solidly within a linker space. We let them work it out. And because it's less concrete, what we're finding is those students who've got some set ideas about what they want to do, they can lean into that a little bit more, and they can use it however it works for them. We're not telling them they're definitely sitting within this box. So this person is a strong linker and probably not as strong a guardian. So they might be make a really good teacher, for example, leaning into that informer space as well. So our suggestion, if you do want to use the resources, is to register on the website. I'll send you the link. I'll pop it in the chat and we'll send it out after this. Download the resource document, then get the slides and the workbook. Share them with whoever you're going to be delivering the program with, because hopefully you'll be supported by other people in your environment to do that. And then we would suggest running the presentations. I prefer the 3 set because it gives them time between each presentation to have a think, have a reflect, go home, talk to mum and dad before they find out what cluster they're in and take the quiz. So I suggest using the 3, but you don't have to. There's also a presentation that can be done in one session there. Run them in a home group or in an information evening or an assembly or just in a presentation, and then support the students to complete the workbook as well. Once they've taken the quiz, then talk about their results. So we've had teachers who have been talking about the results in maths class, and all of the students are unpacking what that might mean as well. And that's okay for them to be talking about it at school after they've got their results. What's next for us? I've covered a lot today. There's a lot in the career clusters. We're really trying to expand what we deliver to help you have that conversation after they've found out what cluster they're in. And we're also doing a lot of work on integrating the career clusters into the Ponder program. So if you don't know what it is, it's a really structured framework that gives you lesson plans, presentations, videos, and activities, a workbook to be able to deliver career education throughout secondary school and for students to be able to build career management competency. And we're going to be stacking the career clusters very much more within the Ponder program so that it's all integrated and cohesive for students. Does anybody else have any questions?
Just want to say thank you. Really enjoying your resources and beautiful posters. Thanks, guys.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Jo. Yep. Glad you like them. Yep, and just trying to get these things out there and get them into your hands. So if you do have any questions, let me know later. I'm going to pop this up so you can have a look later, and I'll send you the slides. And yeah, good luck getting into the resources. Please let me know how you go and how you use them, because all of that feedback helps us refine them. So thank you so much, and thank you very much for paying attention on this Thursday afternoon. Bye, everyone.